that there are some contractors who are already seeing these requirements in the RFPs. I will tell you that the likelihood of actually seeing them in contracts is still a bit of a controversy. You may see them in contracts, but know that there's still a lot of unknowns about the whole CMMC process. And so until the government defines those, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to include these requirements in the contracts, because we won't actually know the details of what we're signing up for. That said, they certainly have provided a lot of details and information. If you're not familiar, I recommend that you get on the DoD's CMMC website, and we've got some resources that we'll be able to show you and share with you, provide you easy access to that. CMMC is going to be comprised of 5 levels. As I said a moment ago, all DoD contractors will be required to certify to at least level 1, and that's the basic cyber hygiene. Note that level 1 of CMMC aligns perfectly with the current FAR clause that, again, I said has already been in contracts since, I believe, 2014 or 2016. I'm drawing a blank on that exact date at the moment, but it's been in contracts for a few years now. As you look at the different levels, the 5 different levels that are here, obviously, as you progress through the levels, then there's going to be more processes, or I should say more practices that will be involved. And the whole idea behind CMMC is that as you progress from level 1 up to level 5, that those processes are becoming more institutionalized within your organization. So in level 1, it's that you're performing the basic stuff. You may not even have good written policies and procedures. You may not be doing a good job of managing them, but you're at least performing some very basic cyber hygiene stuff. When you get to level 2, you see now that those processes would actually, those practices would need to be documented. When you get to level 3, that they're managed. And as you progress into levels 4 and level 5, you're really getting into that proactive and advanced or progressive stage of cybersecurity requirement. Another visual here to understand the 5 levels. Notice that level 1 contains 17 practices, which we're going to talk about in detail in a few moments. You'll notice that, and that's a cumulative number that you see building across there. So level 2 includes all of the 17 practices in level 1 plus 55 in level 2, and so on as you progress all the way up to level 5, which includes a total of 171 practices. The progression of CMMC, again, goes from the basic safeguarding to the advanced or progressive reduction of risk. Our understanding right now is that many government contracts, and certainly all that involve, or I should say many DoD contracts, and all that involve CUI will be at level 3. So contractors performing on those will have to be certified to at least level 3. And that level 3 aligns with the current NIST 800-171 and the DFARS 7012 clause. So if you, there are a few other things that are added in to level 1 in addition to the NIST 800-171, but I would largely say that if you happen to be already compliant with the current DFARS clause, then the level 3 certification should be pretty easy for you. Keep in mind that levels 4 and level 5, while certainly there could be some small businesses who would pursue those and would need to pursue those, depending again on the types of services or products that they're providing to the government, those are typically going to be your larger organizations who have extensive workforces to be able to actually achieve those kinds of requirements. In addition to the 5 levels, there are actually 17 categories of these practices in CMMC. If you remember studying, or if you looked at the NIST 800-171 stuff a while back, that was 110 items across 14 categories, and now the CMMC is 171 practices across these 17 categories. Again, very similar but there are certainly some unique differences between the programs. There's some other, again, just another visual here so that you can kind of see how the CMMC lines up to some of the other requirements that are out there. So look at that, that column there under NIST 800-171, remember 110 items. And so you'll see that level 3 there, as I mentioned, lines up with the NIST 800-171. And then when we get to levels 4 and 5, that includes another 61 practices on top of that in order to achieve level 4 and level 5. All right, so with that, let's dive into the requirements a little bit here. So I'm going to give you, you'll see as we go through the slides, there's going to be a basic requirement on the slide, and then I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit and try to help you understand what each of these things mean. So the first basic requirement is to limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices, including other information systems. And that number there, that P1001 that's in parentheses, and you'll see these numbers as we go through the slides, those reference back to the practices within CMMC. So what does this mean? If you know a little bit about technology, this is something like deny by default and allow by exception. So it's things like you don't let anybody into the system until you've actually created an account and verified them and given them specific access to something. One of the examples that I give is I had a job, it's been a number of years ago now at this point. I was new at the company, new in the position, and I mean, they were a decent sized company, but still a relatively small business. And every time I needed help, they said, oh, just go talk to IT. Just go talk to IT. He'll talk to Kurt. He'll give you access. And sure enough, every time I needed something, Kurt just gave me access, gave me access, gave me access. Well, part of what I explaining there to you is that by default, I didn't have access to anything. And so every time I needed access, I had to ask for access. The downside was that to their system at that time, which they later changed, is that they didn't have any proper review and approval of who was getting access to stuff. So Kurt would authorize people, and he would certainly use some common sense, you know, about who was asking and what they were asking for. But there was not a formal process at that time, and that was later changed. So what's the tool or tip here? And again, we're going to give you tools and tips as we go throughout this process today through the webinar. So you want to implement something like Active Directory or LDAP. If you're in a Linux environment, limit access to the networks and external services to only listed or authorized users. Consider setting up things like a single sign-on solution that provisions accounts and allows you to easily manage access not only to your internal resources, but also to external resources. And you can do this through something like Office 365 and Azure AD. Basic requirement number 2, limit information system access to the types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute. So the first one was to limit the users, and now we want to talk about limiting the types of transactions and functions. And again, very similar to the first one, but we employ this rule of least privilege, and we only grant people access to certain functions even within the system. So think about like your accounting system. Even if you're using QuickBooks, if you set up a user in there or any kind of account, any kind of service, usually, right, you have an administrator. Sometimes you'll have a manager role and then a user role, or, you know, maybe an editor role, depending on what it's called, right? So somebody who's, for example, maybe only has a view-only access, right? That's all they can do. They can log in and look at stuff, but they can't actually do anything. And then you may have somebody who can log in and edit something, but they don't have full edit functionality, right? Maybe they can add records or modify them, but they can't delete records. So it's things like that. You want to be thinking about the types of permissions that these different user accounts have. Requirement number 3 says to verify and control or limit the connections to and the use of external information systems. So think about if you're using some type of off-site backup, or if you're using data sharing between systems. It's quite common in today's world that systems are allowed to talk to each other. In fact, if you're using something like QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online, maybe you've signed up for T-Sheets to do timekeeping, or Expensify to do your expense reports. Those are all different systems, but you can link them together. You can log in and say, please connect this to my QuickBooks account. Well, that right there is a way that you have a connection of systems, right? So you want to make sure that you know what systems are connected and what information sharing is occurring between or among those systems. And by default, we want to, again, similar to requirements number 1, by default, we want to deny any of that external traffic and have a written policy and procedure to review any apps, cloud, or external services before we implement them. We want to make sure that we have a way to review and approve those and not just set them up. Perfect example quickly on this is that we have a client and they have an internal employee that is constantly setting up new services because he wants to test things. And I don't think that he's out to do anything wrong, and I don't think he's malicious, but unfortunately they don't have a good practice in place to review those services before he runs out to set them up. Number 4 is to control the information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. So think about your website, social media, a newsletter that goes out. Maybe you have a client portal, a customer portal that your customers or clients can log into. Think about where and how that system is set up, how it's hosted, what kind of information is posted there. For your websites, we highly, highly recommend that you host those websites on another system or service. So even if you have internal internal servers that you use for your internal applications and file sharing and file storage, do not host your website on an internal server. The reason is that if somebody hacks your website and your website is hosted on an internal server inside of your firewall, then the moment they hack your website, there's a much greater chance that they can then access other stuff behind the firewall because they're already behind the firewall. If you host that website on an external service right there, and you've probably seen some of them, there are lots and lots of website hosting services out there, then that data is, one, it's stored somewhere else. And so even if somebody does hack your website, then they don't have access behind your firewall. And regardless, again, you want to have a policy on what is posted out there, right? So you want to make sure who has posting rights to the website and to the social media, because you don't want the wrong information out there. Number 5, identify your information system users and processes acting on behalf of users or devices. So some of these start to sound a little similar to what we talked about in the beginning, where we talked about authorizing users and stuff. So you want to make sure that you create, in this situation, you want to make sure that you create unique logins for all users and service accounts. And don't have any kind of shared or generic logins. I realize that happens at times. I know that, for example, sometimes we sign up for services. Maybe we have a vendor portal access, right? So maybe you've got an account, for example, with the utility company, or maybe with your bank or somebody else, and there's only one login and you don't have a way to add other users. So maybe you as the business owner set up the original account, but now you need to give a bookkeeper, an accountant, or whatever it is, somebody else in the organization needs to have access to that particular account. And sometimes the only thing we can do is to share that login, but that should be a very rare and unique situation. And later on, I'm going to give you a tool that will actually help you with that process. So you want to look at something like a password manager to help you through that. Number 6, authenticate or verify the identities of those users, processes, or devices as a prerequisite to allowing them to access your organizational information systems. That means things like having a username and password, right? Pretty common setup. The recommendation, and actually one of the requirements in the NIST, and will be in the NIST 800-171 document, and something that would be part of the CMMC Level 3, is that you're enabling multi-factor authentication on your networks, devices, and other services. Make sure that you've enabled multi-factor authentication on as many services and accounts as possible. That includes your social media, website, maintenance, utility accounts, anything where somebody logs in. If you can enable multi-factor authentication, you need to do it. Multi-factor authentication is where you have two of three things: something you have, something you know, and something that you are. Something that you know is your user ID and password. Something that you have is like a digital certificate or a token, one of those authenticator apps on your phone that generates those passwords. And something that you are is biometric, like a face scan, iris scan, fingerprint, something like that. And I've actually heard that there are some tools out there that do voice recognition as part of this now too. So again, enable that multi-factor authentication, because that's another layer of security that even if somebody were to somehow obtain or figure out your username and password, they would need that other piece of information in order to be able to access the system or the account. Number 7 says to sanitize or destroy information system media containing federal contract information or FCI before the disposal or release or reuse of that media. So note, so the requirement says to sanitize or destroy. I would tell you that if you talk to IT professionals, we all agree that there's no real safe way to sanitize media. There are a lot of tools out there that, even though they say they will wipe the hard drive, there are plenty of other tools out there that can do things to help piece that information back together. So generally, it's accepted that the only safe way is to actually destroy the device. There are companies out there that provide this. So if you think about your document shredding companies like Shredded and Iron Mountain and others, they also provide hard drive shredding. And that picture that we've got there for you is what a hard drive looks like after it's been shredded. Just like they do with paper, they run the thing through a machine that tears it up into tiny little pieces so that there's no way you'd be able to put that back together and get any of the data off of it. And make sure that you remove hard drive. I think keep in mind that your printers, copiers, and other stuff have hard drives in them as well. So if you're either going to reuse that piece of equipment, if you're going to donate it somewhere, which still may be a very worthy cause, make sure that you remove the hard drives out of there before you donate or otherwise recycle those items. Number 8 is to limit physical access to the organizational information systems, equipment, and the respective operating environments to authorized individuals. There are a couple of things on this, making sure that you simply lock up the servers. So one of the things that I tell people is it can be as simple as taking those servers and your router and your modem and putting it in a locked closet. Now, you want to make sure it's got good ventilation, so it might require installing some vents or whatever. But, in your small office, you may have a janitor's closet, and stuff could be potentially locked in there. I'm not saying the janitor's closet is the best place, but you get the idea. Some kind of closet or a way to do it. Another easy way to do it is to put it in racks. And for many small businesses, a small rack like that is pictured here mounts on the wall. Of course, you want to drill it into the stud so that it's secure. But those devices there will hold, a few servers, again, your router and other items in there. And that device is about $250 to $300, relatively inexpensive, relatively easy to install, and provides a good bit of physical security to your servers. And why do you want to lock them up? Because you want to make sure that somebody can't come along and plug a USB drive or something else into them and potentially either infect it or extract data or do something else that they shouldn't be able to do physically, again, with those servers and routers. Number 9 is escort visitors and monitor visitor activity. You need to maintain audit logs of physical access and control and manage physical access devices. Probably most of you have been on site at either a government facility or a prime facility. And what do? Right? When you walk in the front door, You have to sign in, you have to show ID. Many places, almost all anymore that I go to, you have to have an escort. They give you a badge. Many of them either will not allow you to carry phones and laptops with you, or depending on the type of work that you're there to perform, they take down the serial numbers on them. They cover the cameras on them with tape or little stickers, right? So there's a lot of stuff that they do to, again, monitor and escort visitors. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to invest in one of the big software packages like some of the big firms have when you walk in the door, but at the very least, make sure you've got a log to check people in, check them out, you know who you're dealing with, make sure that they're escorted, and make sure that they're not allowed access to stuff that they shouldn't have access. If you have, you know, access cards, you know, to your building, if you've got those cards that you walk up and wave, right, and it automatically unlocks the door, make sure that you've got the proper settings for the groups of employees and contractors, things like the times of day, the days of the week, and other stuff that they can access each of those physical areas. Number 10 is to monitor, control, and protect organizational communications. That's things like your information that's transmitted or received by organizational information systems at both the external and key internal boundaries. So block unknown traffic. Again, we want to make sure that by default, we're blocking, we're excluding, and we only implement that rule of least privilege. We only allow access by either an individual, an account, a transaction, another system, by exception, that we've reviewed that in some way and we've specifically granted access only to that thing. Again, back to the idea, if you have something like QuickBooks and you've implemented T-Sheets, or again, Expensify, HubDoc, a number of other stuff out there, you'll also see this a lot of times, how many of you have signed up for some service using your Google account or your Facebook account. And when you connect those accounts, it'll pop up and it'll say, Google now has access to see your profile and your picture, your contact names, and your calendar and whatever, right? So they're listing and telling you what that service has access to. And when you click OK or authorize, then you're giving them consent in order to do that. But that is your point right there, where you say, okay, I know now what information is going to be exchanged between these systems, and I'm making a conscious decision to say, yes, it's okay for these systems to share this information and data. Number 11 says to implement subnetworks for publicly accessible system components that are either physically or logically separated from internal networks. So what does that mean? So things like having a guest network that is separate from your internal network. If you have a physical office site and you have customers and vendors who come to your facility and access, for example, your Wi-Fi while they're there, there should be separation behind the scenes so that somebody who connects to your guest Wi-Fi cannot access your internal network. They shouldn't be able to see printers, copiers, or anything that's on your internal network. There are some relatively easy ways to do that depending on the complexity of the system that you have set up. You know, and it can be, there are some large organizations that actually go so far as to bring in a completely separate internet connection, and they have separate devices and they have a separate network throughout the facility for the guest network that is physically separated in that situation from the internal network, versus being what we refer to as logically separated. And logically separated simply means that it's all still using the same equipment, but we've put up rules and digital barriers and stuff in place so that the two networks can't cross over. Again, comment here about your public website. If you've got a public website out there, please, please, please do not have links on there for employee login to your internal network or to some other stuff. If you've got, you know, employee networks, vendor portals and other stuff, you need to have other ways to communicate and share those links and information with those people. Do not put them on your publicly available website, because there are programs out there that all they do, they're trolling programs. They go across the website and they're looking at every link that's in the website. And so they're trying to see what that link is and where it goes. And once they figure out that link goes into like an internal network, then they're going to hone in and try to break their way into that network. Number 12 says that you need to identify, report, and correct information and information system flaws in a timely manner. What does that mean? You need to have some tools and systems in place to identify issues, and you need to actually fix them. So the next couple of things that we'll talk about here, there's a bit of an overlap. So obviously you want to make sure that you've got virus protection and anti-malware, which we're going to talk a little bit about on the next slide. But all of these various tools that can scan and do stuff provide reports. They provide alerts. So if you get an alert, you need to pay attention and you need to respond to that alert. And you need to, you know, if it's something either you can do or an IT person, or if you outsource those IT services, you need to make sure that you're responding to those alerts and you're fixing those system flaws in a timely manner. We recommend using a help desk tool. So it's possible that maybe you're already using a help desk for your external clients, right? So maybe you provide some kind of service and you have a help desk already where your clients can contact you for help. You can have your internal employees report IT issues and stuff through there so that they can be tracked as well. Number 13 says to provide protection from malicious code at appropriate locations within organizational systems. Very simply, install antivirus and anti-malware devices, anti-malware on all devices. That includes your servers, your PCs, laptops, desktops, phones, tablets, everything needs to have antivirus and anti-malware on it. Yes, your phones and tablets can be hacked. They do need to be protected, okay? Most all of us have access to company resources on our cell phones, whether it's a personal cell phone and a bring your own device environment, or a work cell phone that is configured to access those work resources. Regardless, there are other ways in, right, to your systems and data, so you want to make sure that all of those access points are protected. Number 14 says to update that malicious code. Let me back up. Number 13 said to install it. Number 14 says to update it. Make sure that you've got it set up. There are actually two things that need to be updated when we talk about antivirus and anti-malware, and that is the program itself and what they refer to as the virus definition file. So the program itself, so let's say you're using McAfee or Trend Micro or something like that, right? So you bought one of those programs and installed it. That's the program itself. And then every day that program runs out to their servers. So for example, if you sign up for McAfee, as an example, every day that software is going to contact the McAfee servers and say, give me the latest virus definition update. That's the tool that the software uses when it's scanning your system and your files. It's comparing the information in your system and files to the information in that virus definition file. And that's when it says, oh, I found something that matches, I need to do something about it. So again, you want to make sure that the program itself is updated and that you've got it configured to update daily. If you downloaded and installed this out of the box, these should already be set appropriately. But if at any time you or somebody else went in and made changes, it's possible that that update was not performed. The other things that can cause problems with that is sometimes if your PC is offline or loses internet connection for a period of time, it may trigger something to be out of date. So again, you just want to check that stuff. And number 15 here, perform periodic scans of the information system and real-time scans. So again, this 13, 14, 15 are all related. Your stuff, and you've probably seen this, is that when you have downloaded something, depending on what tool that you have installed on your computer, it'll pop up and it'll say, scanning this download before it lets you actually open it, right? There's a reason it's doing that, because it wants to make sure that somebody either didn't email you something or that you didn't download something from a website that contains malicious information that could harm your computer or networks. All right, so actually let me back up for a second there and stop. we covered 15 items, and I said we were talking about CMMC, and CMMC Level 1 was aligned with the basic FAR clause, which actually has the 15 items, but I said CMMC Level 1, a little tongue-tied there, has 17 items. You say 17 doesn't equal 15, and I would say largely you're correct. If I back up here and look at a couple of these slides, I forget where it is exactly, but remember I showed you these P numbers in parentheses. If you go back and look, you'll see there's actually a couple of these slides. There's a couple of these requirements that have 2 in them. So it was 1 item in the basic FAR clause that broke out to 2 items in the CMMC Level 1. It's the exact same requirements, it's just that they broke them out a little bit differently in the CMMC, okay? So if you're confused of why you're seeing 15 versus 17, that's why. All right, so let's talk about some tools that you can use for basic cyber hygiene. You're a small business. What in the world can you do to at least get a grasp on this and get moving in the right direction? The first is your domain. Buy a domain. Please, please, please stop running your businesses out of Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, AOL. I will tell you, and I'm very forthright in this, if you are doing business with me and you email me from a Hotmail or Gmail account, we're not going to do business. Simply because, and you might think that I'm arrogant when I say that, but there are too many issues with Yahoo and Gmail and other stuff, particularly Yahoo and some others that have been hacked way too many times. There are too many security issues in that stuff. And if we're doing business, we're not doing business through some personal email account. You need to have a business-grade email account. These are not expensive, folks. Buying your domain name itself can be anywhere from $10 to $15 a year to own that. Very, very inexpensive. You can set up Office 365 or Google G Suites for business. Relatively inexpensive. Again, can anywhere, depending on the number of employees and some other stuff that's involved in that. If it's even just you, if it's 1 or 2 people and you're just getting started in your business, this could be as simple as a few $100s a year. Again, relatively inexpensive and very easy to set up. These services are affordable, they're scalable, and they have a lot of built-in security above and beyond what you'll get from these personal email services that are out there. And you look more professional, right? It looks a lot better. If you're Bob's Used Cars, it looks a whole lot better to have an email address that says bob@bobsusedcars.com instead of emailing people from bobsusedcars@gmail.com. The next item here, and I hinted at this a little earlier in the presentation, is password management. So hopefully some of you are already using password managers. If you're not, we've given you a few examples here. These are relatively inexpensive tools. So what is a password manager and what does it do? So these are tools that are encrypted. So they have an encrypted vault where you can store your login information. So you can store your login ID, your username, your password, the website that you're actually using. And then you have a secure password that actually secures the vault. It is an encrypted vault. When you're the one who creates the password, that password is the key. That's the encryption key. And the companies themselves do not have access. They couldn't access your vault if they wanted to, because the only way to access it is when you're dealing with encrypted stuff is to have the key. And since you created the key and you didn't give the key to the company, then they have no way to get into it. And you might say, well, what if somebody were actually able to access, what if they figured out my key? What if they figured out my password to the password manager? Well, there are some different things. One is that you enable multi-factor authentication on the password manager itself. So that even if I figured out your username and password to the password manager, I would still need that other piece of information in order to open the account. So that would keep me out. If you enable multi-factor authentication on as many accounts and services as possible, then again, let's say I even did get access to your password manager and figured out some of your passwords and stuff in there, it wouldn't do me any good because I would have difficulty accessing those accounts that had multi-factor authentication. One of the other nice things the password managers do is they have the ability to generate secure passwords, or what I affectionately refer to as gobbledygook passwords, right? You've got a password that's uppercase G, ampersand, lowercase y, the number 2, you know, the caret symbol, a bunch of other stuff, right? And nothing you'd ever remember, right? But it's a very secure password. So these password managers can generate those for you, and you should generate a new unique password using one of these tools for every account you create. If you do that, you enable multi-factor authentication on the account, you enable multi-factor authentication on the password manager tool, then you have multiple layers of security in managing your password. One of the other nice things, and what I was hinting at earlier in the presentation, is that these password managers, if you have a team set up, and we use one of these and we have a team set up for us, in those situations where you do have only one login to an account and you're not, and it happens, as I said, we realize, right, that there are times where you only get one login, or maybe you buy access to something for a license and you're not misusing the license. I mean, you can be, depending on the nature of the license, which is a whole other situation. But sometimes you buy, you know, a single user license for the business, but maybe multiple people need to be able to access the license. Well, a great way to do that is to put the information in the password manager, and then you can share that with other users in your team. And I'm seeing your questions come in. That's great. Keep them coming in. They're popping up. We will have some time at the end of the presentation here in a little bit to go through some of those questions. Training. I can't stress this enough, okay? There are a number of training resources that are available to you. You're doing some of it right here today with your local PTAC organization there with GACO. I believe if you talk to Kate, they probably have some other resources available to you. Check those out. I know she said in the beginning that you have some Govology webinars coming up. In fact, we are a Govology training partner. So if you participate in the Govology stuff with the GACO team there, you'll be seeing us in the very near future. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we'll be on there. We have 12 webinars this year on accounting stuff, but that platform provides a lot of training across government contracts, and I know there's some others out there who are providing cybersecurity training. So you want to make sure when we talk about here about training, you got to train all employees. Every single employee in your organization needs at least basic cyber hygiene training on an annual basis. Why? Because it's an ever-changing threat. It's constant. You want to make sure that you're providing the most recent information about any kind of phishing schemes or anything, any issues that you're having. And when I say annual training, it's not necessarily only once a year. If you have certain employees who have access to advanced stuff, you probably want more training. You need to, again, provide at least regular updates, even if it's not official training. But if, for example, if you're seeing a spike in phishing scams or other things that are happening with your domain and with your email, you want to get some notification out to your employees to say, beware, we're seeing a spike of stuff, stay on top of it. And in today's world right now, with so many people working at home, that is in fact what many of us are seeing, is that probably many of you heard about Zoom and others who were the platform that we're on, which is a great platform. We use it. We love Zoom, but unfortunately, all of a sudden when, basically the nation was shut down and we're all working from home and everybody started using these tools more often, hackers figured out, hey, there's some loopholes here that we could get into and do some pretty crazy stuff. Luckily, Zoom was on top of it. They fixed things quickly. They did a lot of patches. They rolled out stuff. It's an even more secure platform now, which is great. But when we have more people working from home and more stuff happening, there's more opportunity for bad actors out there to try to get in to our systems. Again, whether that's getting into our email, getting into our cloud servers, our internal servers, whatever that may be. So get that training out there to all of your employees. With that, I do want to say, please contact us. I'm going to switch and share another thing on my screen here in a moment. I want to show you a couple of things, and then we'll get into the Q&A. But you can find us online at leftbrainpro.com, and specifically if you click on presentations, you'll be able to download information from here today. We give you links to several of the things that we talked about. You can find us on social media. If you ever have questions, please contact us, support@leftbrainpro.com. Again, support@leftbrainpro.com is the easiest. And if you give me a second, I'm going to slide something else over to my other screen here. If I get my mouse to come share, I've got two screens in my mouth. There it goes. Didn't want to participate. So I just want to show this to you. So let me zoom in on this. I got a couple of things that I want to show you. One is, again, if you come to our website, if you click on resources, we have a number of things out here for you. One of them is cybersecurity. I'm actually going to be making some updates to this, but there are a number of good details out here for you. I said that you can come to presentations and find information on the various presentations that we do. So you'll be able to come out here later today and get information on today's. And the last thing that I want to show you really quickly, and this I actually just got my hands on the other day. I told you all of this cybersecurity stuff is happening very quickly. A lot of webinars and stuff happening. The CMMC group is putting out some information. This was a great Q&A, and what I can do is share this with everybody. I can get it to Kate, and she can send it as a follow-up email. But basically, what this does is, I'm trying to get my mouse back over here. I apologize, I'm having some technical. There we go. Having some technical issues here. A lot of Q&A about what's happening with CMMC. Again, and I just want to highlight a couple of things. Just a reminder that CMMC Level 1 is consistent with FAR, and it's identified as basic. As I said, it's already been a requirement for a number of years. There are a couple of other ones in here. Will PTAC be providing training? Yes, there's going to be more stuff coming. So keep your eyes and ears open. And again, if you're on the mailing list there and communicating with Kate and the others in her team, they'll be getting this information out to you. Again, just other stuff in here that flows down to suppliers. One of the interesting things here, this question number 18, I'm really curious to see this. And see what happens. They're supposed to be providing some additional templates of what the actual assessment will be. So as I said earlier, when we talk about the certification process and I'm going to talk a little bit more about certification process here in a moment. But when I was talking about the requirements showing up in contracts, that if they started showing up this year, it would be a little difficult because there were some unknowns. Well, a lot of the unknowns are really around the certification and assessment process. There is a CMMC accreditation board. They are a third-party organization that will be training the assessors or the auditors. They'll be basically certifying those auditors who can go out and perform the assessments for people like you who need to be assessed and have that certification. So that process is still being defined. And actually what I can do is I will show you really quickly the CMMC website. So it's acquisition.osd. Let me make this bigger for you again. I'm on a different screen, and I realize if I don't zoom in on these, they don't show up correctly. But if you come out here to DoD CMMC website. Again, they're providing updates, so you'll see what's happening. They've got excellent FAQ information out here. I encourage you to come read through this if you haven't already. The CMMC model itself is out here, so we're on version 1.02. We believe that the model is pretty stable at this point. You might continue to see some minor tweaks, but most of what's out here we believe is going to stay the same. Well, again, we do expect to see in the very near future. And the other thing that you can do is follow the CMMCAB.org. This again is the accreditation body. I'm not sure why my browser keeps resetting the size. But this is another great website to come out here and follow along. You can actually sign up to be part of their mailing list, and I would highly recommend that, so that, again, it helps you stay on top of what's happening. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen so I can easily see the chat. And I guess, Jenny, if you want to jump in here and help me with some Q&A, that would be great. Jenny, are you, I'm not hearing any audio.
I'm trying to see her in the list, Robert. Is it Jennifer?
Jennifer, it shows she's unmuted. Jenny?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Not sure what happened.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I've got you.
Okay.
So if you want to go with the Q&A, that'd be great.
Yes. So the first question came pretty early on, and it was based on the tool question for Basic Requirement 1. And the question was, would Office 365 GCC government-specific deployment be required to comply?
So that's an excellent question. And when we talk about actually meeting the CMMC Level 3 and the requirements in the NIST 800-171 and the existing DFARS 7012 clause, then the answer is generally yes. Meeting the requirements in the commercial environment is difficult. Could be done, but there are some, there'd be some key things that are not available in the commercial environment that are available in the GCC High. That said, if you're only going after level 1, there would not necessarily be a requirement, and I would say there would not be a requirement to do GCC High. And the other thing that's a couple other thoughts are, if you've looked at GCC High, you've probably already figured out that it's very expensive, extremely expensive in comparison to setting up the 365 commercial and having somebody enable some of the additional security features that are available within the Office 365 commercial. You have to have sponsorship basically to get in there. Essentially, you've got to have, they don't necessarily formal sponsorship, but you have to have a government contract that requires you to do this. You have to get somebody to, so there are some loopholes to jump through. It's very time consuming, it's very expensive. And for the average small company right now, it's really about getting the basic stuff in place and progressing through compliance. And that's true with any kind of compliance system. Unfortunately, I will tell you, there are some providers out there that will tell you, you got to do GCC High. It's the only option. And if you don't do it, you're a failure and you're a horrible company. And I've heard some really crazy things out there, and it's simply not true. We believe, and we can point you to some providers who take the approach that we do. The compliance is always a continuous process. It's about continuous improvement. Nobody checks off all 110 items of the NIST. They don't check them all off at once. It doesn't happen overnight, but you got to show that you're taking steps and moving in the right direction. And you can take the first steps with Office 365 Commercial enable some of the additional security features.
Join the meeting.
And again, just continue improving.
Okay, the next question. Can level 3 of the CMMC requirements be satisfied using Microsoft products, such as Office 365, with a Microsoft virtual server in lieu of a dedicated server on premises?
Potentially. Again, there are some very specific requirements in there. I'll tell you that the biggest issue, I'm going to answer it this way because it kind of ties back to the first question. One of the main issues with Office 365 Commercial, and it's also an issue with many cloud-hosted services. It's not that cloud is bad. It's not that at all. In fact, the cloud is very, very secure, and we recommend cloud solutions to our clients. The issue is that one of the requirements in the 7012 clause is that if there is a breach or an incident, that you need to be able to provide images of the systems that were affected so that they can do analysis on that and try to figure out what happened and how it happened and what was affected. The problem with Office 365 Commercial, and again, many cloud services, is that they're what we refer to as multi-tenant installations. That means that even though you have your own domain set up in there, just as we do, if you actually look at the servers, if we could, I certainly don't have access to that, but if somebody who had access to actually look at the servers where our Office 365 data is stored, you would find Office 365 data from other Microsoft clients on that same server. Doesn't mean I can access it, doesn't mean they can access my stuff, but it's on there. And so if I had an incident and I went to report that under DoD and they asked for image copies of the system, the problem is that Microsoft would be, and they won't do this, by the way, Microsoft would be providing a copy of not only my data, but likely and potentially data from other customers. And because those customers would not have approved that, right, then there's no way for me to actually do that. And that's one of the problems with Office 365 Commercial. It's not insecure. It's not a bad tool. It's just that out of the box, it doesn't meet some of the very detailed requirements that you can achieve in GCC High.
Great, thank you. The next question, what level of Norton or McAfee products are sufficient to meet requirements?
If you're the small mom and pop and you're just getting started, I would say at least having a paid version of any of these tools. I personally am not a fan of Norton's products, but there are plenty of other out there, Trend Micro, McAfee, ESET. I mean, there are plenty out there to look at. Again, get a paid version at least, and that's even on, again, if it's you and a significant other, or you and a business partner, you got a couple of people and it's only the two of you getting started, as we often know is the case when you're working with PTACs, at least get something basic on there. And those are like $40, $50 a year for that subscription, very inexpensive. You know, if you're a small business, if you're truly got maybe a few employees and a few computers and stuff, the small business versions of these tools, again, are still very inexpensive, probably the equivalent of around $50 per computer per year. The nice thing is that when you get into those team or business level accounts, then you have a little more administrative functionality with all the devices that are connected. And again, it's getting the basic stuff on there so that you are checking for viruses and malware, blocking them. Those tools will, you want to make sure again that they're updated. They'll be doing, weekly scans by default of the entire system. And then they do periodic scans as well as scanning each individual file that you download, upload, receive through email, etc.
Okay, our last question ties into the previous one regarding requirements 13 and 14, malicious code protection. Is there an expectation that an approved products list will be available from the CMMC AB?
No, I would, in fact, what we received even during the NIST 800 stuff and the DFARS, if you read the opening stuff in NIST 800-171, the document clearly states that there is no specific software that will be recommended. And in fact, they say that many, and this is true, that many of the requirements in the NIST 800-171, which again aligns with CMMC Level 3 for right now, many of those requirements do not require any specific hardware or software. Now, that said, we recognize that you know, certainly hardware and software help us achieve many of those things, but many of the requirements are policy and process oriented stuff. So it's having a way to review, you know, as I said, you know, a way to review new users when you add them. You know, do you have to buy a I mean, obviously, if you're a large company and you got hundreds of employees, yeah, you probably have software that allows you to onboard, you know, new users and do a bunch of stuff. If you're a small company with a handful of employees, that's a paper process, right? There's no requirement. And because of that, they're not going to say that any particular software company in and of itself is going to satisfy the requirement. It's all in how the stuff is configured. So just like I said with Office 365 Commercial versus High, certainly there are other things in GCC High that do meet the requirements. Cannot deny that at all. But I will tell you that, again, Office 365 Commercial has additional security features which are not enabled. I'm not saying that, you know, even the basic, if you did nothing, Office 365 Commercial is still very secure, but there are additional layers of security that can be enabled even within the Office 365 Commercial. And what I'm getting at here, it's all in how you configure it. I'm going to give you another quick analogy. As I said, we're accountants. We do a lot of work helping people get approved accounting systems. And so when we talk about approved accounting systems, invariably somebody will say, well, I was told I have to buy this brand of software because it's approved for government contractors. That's not true, okay? There are a number of accounting software out there that were designed for government contractors and have some very specific and unique functionality on them. But simply buying and installing that software does not mean that you will have a compliant or an approved accounting or an adequate system. It's all in how it's configured, and the same thing is true here. Whether it's the Office 365, whether it's the particular antivirus or anti-malware that you buy, it's really in how you configure it.
Okay, if we have time for one more question, one just came in. And this
I
is
think we've got
Office.
until 11:30, so I think we've got some time.
Great. This one is in regards to Office 365 GCC high eligibility. This attendee has encountered an apparent catch-22 for a client that is not presently working on government contracts. They don't appear able to get preemptive eligibility support required to get into the Gov Cloud. As a result, it seems unlikely they would be able to pass the L3 assessment that would enable them to get contracts. Can you provide any feedback on this situation based on your experience?
Yeah, this is, and I was kind of hinting at this earlier, but you nailed you've nailed it right on the head, and that is, unfortunately, we have situations where contractors do not currently have a contract in hand. And so when you go to Microsoft through one of their approved partners, and I also must note, there are only a handful of approved partners to actually do the GCC High. So if you're already working with a Microsoft partner, like we are, so we already have our managed service provider is a Microsoft, I think they're Gold or whatever, right? But they're a Microsoft approved partner. And many of you out there may be working with a Microsoft approved partner. That does not mean that they can sell you the GCC High. There's a very, very small number. Last I looked, I think there might be 10 on that list of approved partners who can actually sell the GCC High. So one, you've got that to jump through. You do, as I believe it's Tyler here questioned, you do have to have a contract that you can provide them that says, yes, we need to do this, because they're going to verify that. And without that, you're not going to get through the wickets of GCC High. My response back to you is twofold. One, again, if they're currently on Office 365, you know, get their managed service provider to help them enable as many of the additional security features as they possibly can. That's going to continue to help check off more things on that list. And the other piece, again, is just about that, right? That any compliance program, I said this already, any compliance program is about getting better. It's a continuous process. Your client is not going to be able to check off all 110 items out of the, out of the gate. Doesn't happen. It's just not, it's not feasible that they're going to get there. It's about what have they done and what are they doing to address those items, right? Everybody's going to have a POAM, or what we refer to as a, and let me pause for a moment and talk about that. You're going to create an SSP, which is your system security plan. That's your list of the requirements and what you're going to meet them. And then you're going to have a POAM, which is a plan of actions and milestones, which is your list of unfinished items and what you're going to do to fix them and when you're going to fix them. And it's okay that that's part of the review process. Now, as far as whether or not their customer, who appears to be L3, would accept that, then that's something that they're going to have to work through with their particular client. Before we get to another question, I said that I wanted to talk a little bit about the certification process, and I forgot to insert this. We've got a couple of minutes here. Talk about the CMMC certification process. So what will happen in the near future is that you will have to go to a third-party assessor. I mentioned those, that there will be third-party assessors or auditors who will come in and audit you and determine whether or not your policies, procedures, and everything you have in place meet the requirements. They will provide you a certification approval. This process will be very similar to an ISO. So if you're familiar with how ISO 9001 or AS 9100, for example, operates, where a third-party assessor comes in and evaluates your quality policies and procedures. If you're familiar with that, we expect that this process is going to be very similar, obviously focused on cybersecurity. We're waiting for the details of how that's going to play out. This will be a cost to you as the contractor. You will have to pay for this. We don't know what that cost will be. Obviously, there will be some variance in cost between the assessors and how they price their individual products or services. That price will also vary based upon the size and complexity of your organization and the level of certification that you're going after. So if you're going after level 1, it's going to be relatively inexpensive. Couldn't give you an exact figure, but we're probably talking, if I had to guess, you could probably get a level 1 certification for, maybe $4,000 or $5,000. I'm getting rough guess on my part. Don't quote me on that. A level 3 certification is probably going to be something in the tens of thousands of dollars. A level 3 for some organizations might be significantly more than that. Again, the more employees you have, the more systems you have, the more services you have, things like that, right? Then that's a more complex organization, more stuff to test, more policies and procedures to write to cover those things, and it's going to be more expensive for those kinds of things. These will be allowable costs, right? So assuming that they otherwise meet the requirements of allowability, but in and of themselves generally should be allowable costs. So they would be included in your rates back to the government. All right, with that, some other questions.
We have another question that just came in. We have 8 computers running in our office. Can I protect my server only?
Nope, you need to protect everything, right? Because everything is connected one way or another. And so your employees, if they take a laptop out of the office, or there are too many scenarios at play. So in that case, if you had 8 computers and 1 server, then you need to install the antivirus and the anti-malware on all 9 of those things, in addition to plenty of other stuff that needs to be set up on your server. But you're looking at, we refer to these as endpoints. And so you want to make sure that you secure every endpoint. So an endpoint is something that where data is processed or something can be accessed. And that's why when we were on the slide a while ago about phones and tablets, and I said they need to be protected, because again, those are also endpoints.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we have at the moment. Oh, wait, another one's coming in. How do I ensure that my manufacturers are level 1 compliant?
Great question. That's actually that's a bit of a hot topic as well. I'm actually developing a course on subcontractor oversight for cybersecurity right now through Management Concepts. So you may see that in the near future if you follow anything with Management Concepts and their training programs. And it's a question that has plagued prime contractors all through for a number of years now through this whole cybersecurity stuff, is how do you verify at all tiers of the supply chain that everybody is compliant? It's been extremely difficult to date for a number of reasons, none the least of which is that people don't have privity of contract with all of the lower tiers. So and what I mean is the privity of contract means that you have a direct legal relationship with that next tier. So if you're the prime and you're first tier subs, you have privity of contract with them, and you certainly have the ability for more oversight and verifying that they meet the requirements in your contracts. The lower tiers are more difficult, but even still, it's a very difficult process because as a prime, let's say, I mean, even let's just say you're a small prime. What if you had 10 subcontractors? Well, that's 10 people that you have to have oversight on. You're going to have to do something to verify that they're doing the right stuff. So how do you do that? That is one of the goals of CMMC, and I believe that CMMC will help, but there is still what I believe and some others believe are some fallacies in CMMC. And so CMMC, again, is this third-party certification, so much like an ISO, right? So if you're dealing with somebody and somebody says that they're ISO certified, you can verify that, right? They provide you a copy of their ISO certification, and you can either accept it at face value and take it, or you can contact their individual, what they refer to as a registrar, and the registrar is the company who performed the audit and maintains that certification for them. You can contact them and say, I have a certificate here. Is it valid? And that registrar can say, yes, that is a valid certificate. So the process will be very similar under CMMC, but one of the problems with CMMC is that there will not be, and there is not for ISO as well, I might point out, there will not be, at least in the current iteration, any kind of single publicly accessible database that you can easily validate these certifications of others in the industry. So the only way you'll be able to do that is actually to obtain the certification from the supplier. And if you want another level of assurance, then you'll have to contact that assessor to verify it. And because there will be many assessors across the US doing this work, if you had 10 subcontractors, you could potentially have 10 different assessors that, and again, I'm saying if you wanted, I don't know that it would be a requirement, but if you wanted to validate that certification, you would have to contact them to validate that somebody did actually give you a legitimate certificate. Now, here's one of the inherent problems in this process with CMMC, and that's regardless of whether or not you validate the certificate, and that is, how do you know that, okay, so somebody, let's say you have a contractor, they go through the process, they get certified, they present to you a valid certificate, you decide you want to call the assessor and validate it, and they do, and you say, that's great. How do you know that they're actually still doing the stuff they're supposed to be doing? That's the ultimate question that I'm not sure anybody can really answer right now. Because unfortunately, and we've seen this with a number of compliance programs, we see it all the time in the accounting world, a company will jump through the hoops, they would do all the stuff to get an adequate, the term in accounting systems, that's technically an adequate accounting system. People refer to it as an approved accounting system. But they get that letter of approval, that stamp of approval, and they think they're golden. The problem is that they take the policy and procedure manual that they use to achieve that, they put it on the shelf, and then they don't take it off and look at it ever again. And that's potentially, and it's likely, and it will happen with some people in CMMC, is that you're going to have contractors who go through the effort, they do all the right stuff, they get the policies and procedures, and then they, the moment the auditors leave, they put the policy procedure manual up on the shelf, and they don't think about it again for another 3 years, because the certifications will be good for 3 years. So a few months before, I don't know when that'll be, 6 months before the certification expires, their assessor is going to contact them and say, hey, you're expiring in 3 months. We need to come out and do our verification audit. And then they'll reach up and get the manual off the shelf and scrape the 2 inches of dust off of it. And you don't know what's happened in between. And in those situations, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I kind of want you to understand how this process, we expect it to work. In those situations, if you were dealing with a subcontractor that needed to be level 3, for example, and I know your question was specifically about level 1, but if you were dealing with a contractor that you knew needed to be level 3 because of CUI, then I would say you need to write stuff into your contract. And if you're a sub, you may see this in your prime, your primes may be doing this to you, of them doing some other kind of oversight and verification. And I don't know exactly what that could be or would be, but it might be site visits, it might be other kind of reporting that they require as part of the contract to validate that you are continuing to do the things that you're supposed to do.
Great. I think that's our last question for today.
Well, great. Thank you. A lot of good questions. Again, I think we'll turn it back over to Kate here, but again, at any time, if you've got questions about this, support@leftbrainpro.com is the best way to get a hold of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. As always, I love your presentations. I always learn so much because I really appreciate how succinct your answers are and how organized you are. Robert has been a speaker, sure, at our ABTAC conferences for the last several years. And the first time I saw him, he made accounting exciting. And I tell him this story all the time. I wish I would have had him at college. maybe my career choice would have been a little different, but I truly appreciate, your insight and your delivery. So thank you very much. And Jen, thank you for taking and keeping track of all the questions. And thank you everyone for joining us. We will be wrapping up here. I will be sending an email with Robert's presentation, so you will have a copy of it. And we also will be sending out a webinar survey. So please let us know your feedback on the webinar and any other topics you would like us to try to bring in to educate you not only on cybersecurity, CMMC, accounting, anything government contracting related. Please let us know in that webinar survey. So thank you everyone. And again, we will be having another webinar next Tuesday about contract changes under the FAR. So that is listed on our website, so you can register through our website if you're interested in that webinar. So thank you very much for everyone joining us, and I will close out the webinar. So thank you once again.